All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, May the 4th. I was about to say April, but May the 4th, and as they say, May the 4th be with you. 2022, and we have quite a bit to cover today, so let's honestly just delve right into it first and foremost. Now, first and foremost, a Russian oligarch with close ties to Putin met with Hunter Biden in Moscow over potential investment deals, according to dailymail.co.uk. Now, there's much more details to that pertaining to, again, I believe some meetings took place in Washington, D.C., I believe a couple others scattered across the United States, and things like this. Now, as I understand it, I don't believe the United States has sanctioned this particular oligarch, but again, and I would say this, if this was a Republican in office, I want to be very clear as well. It speaks to the concept of, if one uses not just private business or what's known as private business, but also private business mixed in with, dare I say, intelligence actions that are not maybe transparent on the surface, one wonders how one could infiltrate in a multi-pronged apparatus a family that is quite heavily involved in politics. In this particular case, the Biden family. I'm not trying to imply anything pertaining to some type of QAnon conspiracy or anything like this. I want to be very clear, because it's not that I'm against nor for QAnon. It's about the concept of playing it down the middle in a neutral sense. I want to be very, very clear about that. Again, because as it pertains to the KRAKEN segment, I really want to make it so that I know you folks want to hear my opinion and my take, but at the same time, I want to be very clear and concise that we need to use, dare I say, objective critical thinking before letting emotion get involved, if you will. Anyways, the next thing is that, or at least try to mitigate that emotion as much as possible. The next, when observing such developments around the world, I don't mean that in all aspects of life, let me be clear. The next thing is that Russia has dismissed speculation that it will declare all-out war in Ukraine in the coming days as, quote, nonsense. Moscow has up until now denied it as a war, instead referring to the invasion as a, quote, special military operation, end quote. But Western officials have speculated that President Vladimir Putin could use the May 9th victory parade to announce an escalation of military action. Let's see what happens when the time comes, when May the 9th comes. And I'm not trying to say that in the sense of like, oh my gosh, let's just chill until May the 9th comes. But here's the thing, folks, and I'm not saying this to be pro-Russian, nor anti-Russian, nor pro-West, nor anti-West. I'm truly saying, if we look at it as a human-on-human perspective, we know there are humans that are part of the intelligence apparatus on both ends of the stick in this case that tend to use, dare I say, what we call, and I want to be careful, allegedly, I'm saying allegedly for YouTube mainly, what we call propaganda, if you will, for the sake of justifying a particular narrative. If that justification for that narrative is for a larger picture, for the better or worse, is not for me to say. However, this is like when, honestly, children on the playground pointing fingers. He did it. No, he did it. It doesn't, unless you were there, how the heck can we believe any of this at this point? And this is just my opinion, but truth be told, this is where, in one of the few times where my opinion seems to, in a good way, conflate or cross over with a non-emotional critical perspective, if you will, critical thinking perspective. But again, I could be wrong. I just want to be very clear here. The next thing is that the United States Supreme Court has voted to strike down the Roe v. Wade ruling that legalized abortion nationwide. An initial draft majority opinion by Justice Alito shows. According to Disclosed TV, and I want to quote because this is from their Telegram and I believe their Twitter post as well, how do such drafts of the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, get leaked to the media before a ruling is announced? This is criminal. It's impossible to overstate the earthquake this will cause inside the court in terms of the destruction of trust among the justices and staff. Okay. After this occurred, barricades, we'll see here, barricades were set up around the United States Supreme Court building after a draft decision was leaked, of course, indicating that the court voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, okay. Following this as well, United States Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts then ordered an investigation of the Roe v. Wade leak, says the document is authentic, but it does not represent the final position. Okay. I have a few different perspectives on this, and I'll tell you, and I think of this, dare I say, from an attempted critical thinking, but dare I say an intelligence angle. And I'm not trying to say that I'm, smarter than anyone. That is not the case. Again, just because I'm behind the microphone doesn't mean that I'm any better than any of you folks. A lot of you listening right now know a lot more than I, and I really do mean that. However, in this particular case, looking at this from, I don't want to say conspiracy, but from an intelligence perspective, this is what some people could call a multi-pronged or dual use, dare I say, quote unquote, tactic or tool, if you will. Dual use meaning it could be used for both good and bad. And you might be saying, Dave, okay, what do you mean? I have a personal take. This does not mean that you folks should agree with me in this case. This is my personal take that what happened here was a deliberate leak. From who, it's hard to say, but was a deliberate leak in order to create an uprising to distract from a particular set of documents that came out on the same day. I think a lot of you folks know what I'm referring to when I say that this seemed to distract from the, dare I say, the data dump of the company that, developed one of the beep boops. And I say this carefully because it is not, we're getting into that territory of, COVID, and this is not my place to say pertaining to if one should or should not have gotten what I call on YouTube the beep boop. I really do mean that. Now, with that being said, that's theory number one, attempted distraction from that. Theory number two, or it could be both or neither of what I'm about to say. Theory number two is that, or proposal number two is that this seems to be deliberately imploding the court from the inside out in the long run, signifying that it's possible we may not need a federal court with respects to what's coming pertaining to the UAP topic. And I really do mean that, to show that the people could truly decide for themselves. And that's, dare I say, maybe a bit of a stretch in a good faith manner. But hey, a guy can hope, right? So it's hard to say. Now, I do want to mention as well that I'm not trying to get conspiratorial. I want to be very clear here. But I do find it quite peculiar that, again, Justice Roberts deleted his Twitter account after so many people were asking him, what were you doing on Epstein's Island? There's pictures of him and Ghislaine and all of this. Ghislaine Maxwell, to be clear, this is the thing, right? You have, and look, I'm just reporting what I see, what all of us see. You have Elon Musk on Twitter now saying, how come the Ghislaine Maxwell client list didn't get released after, during the court case? What happened there? Again, some people speculate this is Elon trying to, as the theory goes, as the saying goes, if you bring yourself down before everybody else does, you control the way that it happens. It's possible this is what Mr. Musk is trying to do. It's possible he was, again, I don't know. But again, you folks want to get my take on it? That's my take. And I really do mean this in a non-emotional, neutral perspective. So again, make of that as you will. The next thing is that democratic institutions are not part of the Bill Gates' GERM plan, a technocratic manifest to combat future pandemics, according to welt.de. GERM stands for something. Please forgive me. I should have brushed up on what it stood for. Essentially, what I find here is that Mr. Gates, and I'm not, again, I want to be very clear, I'm not trying to get woo-woo or tinfoil hat or conspiratorial, but the views and perspectives and statements of Mr. Gates seem to align with that of Dr. Fauci pertaining to how Dr. Fauci said a handful of days or weeks ago relative to the day I'm recording this, that Mr. Fauci said something, I'm paraphrasing here, that he was not happy about rulings of courts pertaining to mandates and lockdowns and things like this. He believes that the medical professionals should have, essentially as I understand it, and please forgive me if I'm interpreting this incorrectly, but Dr. Fauci believes that the court should, not the courts, the medical community, the doctors should have the medical professionals should have free reign without the courts interfering. As I understand it, let me be very clear. If I am incorrect, I truly do mean it. Please correct me in the comments. But last time I checked, I believe that's the chronology of the timeline of what was said and what occurred. The next thing is the European Union Energy Commissioner says the bloc can replace 2/3 of Russian natural gas supplies by the end of the year, 1/3 from alternative suppliers, but 1/3, quote, has to be replaced by renewables, end quote. I find this peculiar. I wonder if this could be potentially used as a way to usher in the free energy, anti-gravity tech, or maybe if it's too early for that, if that's not the play here, if there even is a play in this regard. But again, I don't, unless I'm there when the EU Energy Commission, has their meetings behind closed doors after the camera and the press leave, I don't want to say, folks, because I can't. We weren't there, right? The next thing is the Department of Homeland Security, according to defenseone.com and oig.dhs.gov. I want to be very clear for YouTube because this is not coming from some random website or what have you, but the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, did not adequately follow its internal processes when editing and disseminating an intelligence product regarding Russian interference in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Yeah, it's been stated here that they didn't follow the what's called INA procedure, I believe, intelligence and analysis procedure. It was just totally brushed over and overlooked. So again, I will leave that there. Now, the next thing is that Swisscom suffered a general internet outage on Tuesday evening that lasted almost an hour. Users across Switzerland were affected. As I understand it, I believe some fiber optic cables were cut, and please forgive me if I'm incorrect about that, but I also believe that this is also what occurred in certain parts of France. In my humble perspective, I want to be clear, this is just my perspective. These are not some punks cutting cables. This is a deliberate intelligence operation. From who? I mean, we can guess. We can make some, what's the estimated hypotheses, if you will, but that doesn't mean that we're correct, right? So, or maybe we are. This is the thing. Dare I say that's the intelligence world, if you want to call it, discerning the truth from the nonsense. The next thing is that the United States private payrolls increased by 247,000 in April, a big decline from March, and almost 150,000 fewer than expected. Speaking of which, the United States trade deficit surged to a record high of $109.8 billion in March, topping $100 billion for the first time in history. The deficit exceeded forecasts and is likely the biggest indicator as to why the GDP, the gross domestic product, decreased 1.4% last quarter. I want to be very clear here, and I want to be, look, if we're looking at a big picture, and I'm not saying this is what was or what is, but to be consistent and fair, some have speculated that the Trump administration is partly responsible for this, in addition to what the Biden administration may or may not be allegedly deliberately doing now with respects to enacting on certain import-export actions, if you will. But putting that aside, the reason I say this is because, okay, the thing about this in general, if I'm being honest with you folks, is, again, as I understand it, the Trump administration printed loads of money, and if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but they printed loads of money to prop up the economy, and maybe this is I'm not an economist, and maybe this is a very dumbed-down layman version, so again, I encourage correction in the comments if I'm not describing this clearly enough. I really do. Which propped up the economy temporarily, and inflation, as they say, is good temporarily, but it ends up with everybody being a loser in the long run. Now, again, I'm not an economist, but that's just one way to perceive it. Now, you mix that which allegedly occurred in with, the alleged, I'm going to leave that there, but you guys know where I'm going with this. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. The next thing is that, according to Vice.com, the CDC harvested data from tens of millions of phones in the United States to perform analysis of compliance with curfews. Look, I'm not trying to be like Mr. Know-It-All or anything like this. I had presumed this initially. I mean, with respects to surveillance, the cat's out of the bag, and it's been so for at least 15 years, in my opinion, at the very least, or quote-unquote worst, 10 years. So this does not particularly shock me. But again, it's not so much what is, unfortunately, it's more so how it looks, and that's the unfortunate reality of a lot of things, right? Speaking of which, according to the dailymail.co.uk, George Soros, in addition to Clinton and Obama staffers and European governments, are behind the, quote, anti-Musk campaign, end quote, to force big corporations to boycott Twitter, says the Daily Mail. Look, I want to be very honest with you folks. I know this tends to fall into that whole, Soros, Clinton, Obama, oh my God, what are they up to type thing. I want to be clear. This occurs on the Republican side as well. Now, I will say, personally, and I could be wrong, personally, I have seen less of that on the conservative side lately. But again, as I say, as a very friendly and respectful reminder, it's like flipping a coin. It doesn't matter which side it lands on. It's still the same coin. So I want to be clear about that. I'm trying to really zoom out and think macro here without getting into the nuances of tit-for-tat politics that seem to intentionally distract people, but the people being distracted by it don't have that intended desire to be distracted, but they fall down the rabbit hole so easily. And I will be honest, I am extremely guilty of that. Extremely guilty of that. We fall down the rabbit hole so easily we don't even realize it. Right? And I want to be clear, I am very guilty of that. I'm nobody special. I'm trying my best to sort of view it from an external perspective. The next thing is that the Department of Homeland Security chief was, quote, not aware about the quite precocious, I believe that's how you say it, end quote, TikTok videos posted by the Biden's Ministry of Truth, I think? Disinformation head. Yes, and this is what I'd spoken about on Monday's KRAKEN, specifically pertaining to, you can't Even if she was a conservative or Republican, I want to be very clear. In my humble view, you can't have someone who is blatant about making such TikTok videos about, going after what they call far right wingers. And I understand there are extremists everywhere. I want to be very clear. On the right, on the left, all over the place. But I mean, again, the fact that this DHS chief was not aware of this, I mean, that's from an intelligence perspective, that's very poor homework. So assuming that's an honest response, and I'm trying to do this in a way that's not getting political without leaning in either direction. The next thing is, actually the final thing, is that the United States Fed has raised its interest rates by 0.5 percentage point, the largest hike since the year 2000, and signals more to come. Again, it's not like any of us on the channel here, particularly those that have been listening to the show for a while, are shocked by that per se. I'm not an economist. I think sometimes it's best to not even look at the numbers and just kind of go with the flow of life, if you will. With that being said, again, this all seems to sort of redirect our intention and intents from intents. INTENTS, all of our intents in plural, from focusing on ourselves and trying to better ourselves. And I'm not trying to sound all, woo-woo, kumbaya, let's all sit by the fire, nice and peaceful. Although that would be great, I understand the reality of life, but at the same time, I think the least that we can do is realize when we're being deliberately distracted. So again, I know you folks wanted to get my take on, what happened with, Roe v. Wade and all of this. So again, I want to make the Krakens longer, guys. I really do. But the problem is as each week goes by, the more I look at the news, the more it seems to be honed more and more on just 2 or 3 major events. Whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Elon buying Twitter. I mean, other than that, I do my best to try and find as much, news as I can. But in some cases, dare I say, sometimes it's best if lesser news is reported, perhaps. So again, I thank you so much, folks, for entrusting me to pick out the topics that you feel should be reported on from the bottom of my heart, truly. If you want longer Krakens, I will do my best. But again, as you folks know, the Krakens vary from 10 minutes to 45 minutes. It just depends on, the developments of the day or the week or what have you, right? So without further ado, folks, thank you so very kindly, and we'll catch you all very, very soon. Cheers.